Thank you, Gabriel, for the introduction. I'm very happy and honored to be on this panel and to be the moderator of our panel, The Future of Fashion. And I will be here on this panel with 4 panelists. I'm going to introduce to you briefly. So first of all, Sian, she's the co-founder of A Plastic Planet. So she's creating the option for all of us to be able to choose not only to be gluten-free or buy sugar-free, fat-free, but also plastic-free, which I really think is fantastic. Then Fredrik, he's the founder of True Footprint. He gives every company to assess the data in regards to their supply chain and the actual sustainability to really measure sustainability. Then we have Marco, he's the co-founder of Via Made in Italy, which is a tech solution for businesses to assess basically and work together with Italian suppliers, manufacturers. And we have Stuart, who is the co-founder of the circular sneaker brand 1000 Film. So welcome everybody. Great to be here with everybody of you. So the thing is, why are we talking about overall fashion and the impact of fashion? And the answer to this is it's a very important topic. It's one of the biggest and largest industries on the planet. So in terms of the impact that it is creating, we're talking about 10% of the global CO2 emissions. We're talking about 85% of the clothes ending up at landfills, and only pieces being worn 4 to 7 times, which is almost nothing before they're thrown away. And the industry being responsible for about 20% of the overall industrial water pollution. And we're producing nowadays in the year 2020 more than twice the amount of fashion than we did 15 years ago. So this is a tremendously, on the one hand, big challenge for us as a society to create change, but also a massive opportunity. So, and with one of the idols of mine, I'm going to pass over to Sian. One of the idols of mine is David Attenborough, and he joined Instagram yesterday. Some of you might have seen his first Instagram post, and he said, "We know what to do. So it's just about the how now." And this is how I would like to pass on to you, Sian, in terms of really giving us a picture how you through A Plastic Planet are contributing and how you see what we need to do as a community to basically move forward as a society in the next evolution step towards a circular economy, and especially with the exposure on fashion.
Great, thank you, Wolfgang, and hello everybody. So why am I so obsessed about plastic? Here's me, a serial entrepreneur, and somehow I have become, you know, like a devotee of Sir David Attenborough. And how incredible in your 90s to do your first Instagram post, and what an impact that man is having. Because, you know, certainly in the UK, he is such a legend and we all listen to him. But what's quite interesting to know is that a lot of environmentalists historically have been a little bit frustrated by David Attenborough because he has never stepped out of line. He has never called an industry out. He's only ever focused on the beauty, and he's never focused on the bit that I am now so passionate about, which is the waste and the impact. So for me, the whole thing with plastic is, it's such an extraordinary, it's an incredible material, number one. I mean, who knew man could invent a material that lives forever? And what do we do with it? Do we put it on a pedestal? Do we treat it with respect and price it like gold? No, we literally treat it like rubbish. We throw it in the ocean, we throw it in the landfill. Everything that we now know that we've woken up to. And the thing for me about plastic is that in so many areas of us thinking about the climate crisis, it's overwhelming to us. I don't know, carbon, I can't see it, I can't touch it, I can't feel it. But plastic, every time I shop, I feel guilty. When I take this plastic home, in whatever format, be it a piece of clothing, as we know, 60% of all clothing is made out of plastic, to a bit of packaging around some food and drink, and I put it in the bin, and I now know 9% of that is ever going to have a second life. And never a third, never a fourth. So what I find so interesting about plastic is it's the gateway. If we fix plastic, and if we fix this obsession, this normalization that we have right now with waste, which is a very recent thing. Waste didn't used to happen. We're the only species on the planet that create waste. And the amount of waste that we're creating right now is so phenomenal. If we fix plastic, then directly and indirectly, we will fix so many other things that will have an incredibly positive impact on the planet. So that's why I'm so obsessed and equally so obsessed about fashion and the responsibility of fashion as the second biggest polluter on the planet, and the impact that we have, not even just in the making of clothes and the waste that we know that happens on the cutting room floor, the phenomenal amount. What did I read recently that Hong Kong, 250 tons of textile waste every single day going into landfill. So not only on the production process and the physical wearing and the waste that we all know is going into landfill, but the final fact that I'll leave you with is just the fact that every time we wash our clothes and the impact that we're having, and one family of four, just an average family of four, every week, with the microfibers that are going straight out into our waterways, into our soil, into our air, into the oceans, every single week it's the equivalent of that family going to the beach and throwing in a plastic carrier bag. And this is where we have tremendous opportunity. We didn't know, we misused this incredible material, and now we know. So now there is nothing but incredible opportunity for these new biomaterials, this new bioeconomy of true circularity. So where there is change, as we know, there is always opportunity. And I think in the fashion industry, which is about beauty, about making you feel good about yourself, it has more responsibility really than anybody.
So would you say that we're talking primarily about a lifestyle change more than anything? Because fashion is the one expression for being, you know, showing your emotions, showing who you are. So it's an expressive way of living if you dress accordingly. So would you say that is a lifestyle change that we need to aim for?
Yeah, very much so. Because I think the pandemic has really created a lifestyle change in many ways, hasn't it? I don't know about you, but I've lost that little ding, ding, ding dopamine hit of feel good, of, oh, just one extra little bit of something, a bit of fast feel good, you know, to bring me up to date. I've lost that habit. And much as in the UK, we have our Prime Minister saying, it's your duty to go out and shop. And everybody's saying, I don't want to go back to that way, that hyper-consumptive way that in many ways plastic enabled this ramp up of hyper-consumption that is so recent. So I think this lifestyle change is going to happen. We've already seen it, this next generation, that they want to own less. You know, we talk about shareware of everything now. We're going to borrow more, we're going to repair more. Definitely, I think there will be a big move to buying less and buying better. And where you can, if you don't need to own it, rent it. And I think that's got to be good for everybody. And we need to switch our business models to suit that.
Sounds good. That's a perfect handover to Stuart, who I would like to bring to the panel now. Stuart, you are representative of this new generation. Maybe you can share a bit about your customers. You've told me a few things on our last call about how this new generation behaves and how you play into that with your sneaker brand and company.
Yeah, Wolfgang, thank you so much. And Sean, that was awesome to hear. You know, we've focused so much on waste on our part of the business too, and plastic's a big part of that. To take a step back and kind of frame up, so Stuart, I'm the founder of Thousand Fell, and our core mission really is to end textile waste. And we've started with a line of sneakers that are fully recyclable, and at some point we'll talk about why they're the perfect product to put on a closed loop. Sean, you alluded to it, like rental is great, resale is great, but some products have a half-life, and when they do, and oftentimes just a first user, what's the solution there? And for what we found, and really what we're building and pioneering is the closed loop circular economy. So really taking used product, recapturing them, breaking them down into component parts, and taking those old outputs and making new inputs out of it. And so for us, 80% of an old sneaker goes back into a new sneaker, and are really thoughtful around sort of that full life cycle. But Wolfgang, you brought up a good point on how people are consuming and how people are shopping. And so our core audience is younger. They're like Zillennials, so that older Gen Z, younger millennial audience, like 18 to 24. And what we're seeing is a couple of things. One, like they're shopping in a way where they want to be relatable but different. And so they're constantly want freshness and newness in their wardrobe, but they want to be bought into something. They're also shopping and voting with their dollars, right? And so very values driven. And I think if there's a silver lining at all in what we've seen with COVID and what we've seen with sort of the social justice movement that's happened here in the US, is that people now more than ever believe that individual action can make large impact. And so our core audience is shopping that way too. And that's amazing to see. And so for us, what we're offering and kind of what we're talking about here is how do you provide something new that people are going to burn through, that are going to be the same user or only one user, but being able to provide end-of-life transparency to that. So being able to recapture product, incentivizing them to take it, to send it back to us, actually paying them $20 towards a new purchase when they do send it back. And so we talk often about like the circular economy, and I think the economy piece is oftentimes missing from that, right? It's like you've got this donation or recycling, but oftentimes it doesn't come with any incentive. And so we really want to show customers we value the used material, they should too, and being able to kind of share in that.
Sounds great. And one thought I found really interesting while talking to you the other day, maybe we can share a bit more about that here, is circularity is often thought of, it's in the background, it's not seen, it's done by the companies, it's within the supply chain. You mentioned a point that I found super interesting, which is, to make that transparent and to really create a loop also in terms of communication, information, engagement with the consumer. Maybe you can give us a bit of feedback about that, because that's, I think, for many very, very exciting to hear.
Yeah, so we're really interested in maintaining the connection between customer, product, and brand through the entire life cycle of an item. And when we like kind of talk about business strategy, the way we think about it is brands spend so much time and energy acquiring customers and bringing them in and trying to sell them product, and then they finally do, only to like dump them into a retargeting if you're a direct-to-consumer brand, or like maybe upsell them 6 months later for an email when they've launched something new. And there's this massive opportunity to maintain conversation with the customer throughout the entire life cycle. So what we've done is we've set milestones and a communication channel with this idea of like conversational commerce with our customers, where we're pinging them 2-3 months down the road and giving them advice on how to keep products clean, reminding them that they can recycle it, and sending them through like links for prepaid shipping labels, letting them know the in-person locations in the US where they can drop it off, and then being able to again like issue material credit back to them once they do send it back to be recycled, and then gamifying that process, right? And so with this younger audience and kind of with our core audience, what we're seeing is that there's a desire to kind of engage with the brand in that deeper way. And I think what we've seen sort of in the progression of sustainability that I'm sure a lot of people on this panel and that are watching have seen is that, retail or sustainability 1.0 within retail was sort of beginning a supply chain transparency. Where were your products made? And I think we've seen kind of some big evolution where 5 years ago that was incredibly novel, and now that's kind of becoming table stakes. And we're doing a lot of great work. And I'm sure Fredrik can talk about this on quantifying what that is and mapping that and tracking that. And then 2.0 has been material innovation. And you're seeing that with like recycled inputs that are starting to be used more and more. And the demand is way outpacing sort of what our current supply is. And then 3.0 is really that end of life transparency. And so making sure that we're showing customers where that product goes and having them engaged through that entire process.
Very cool. Thank you. Marco, that's a good for you. You are the founder of Via Made in Italy. And Italian products, more than anything, I find, stand for quality and heritage and craftsmanship. Maybe you can give us a bit of background of what you do and how that impacts, on the one hand, sustainability and the ability to create a new evolution step in fashion coming from Europe towards sustainability through technology, efficiency gains, etc. So overall, if you can give us a bit of feedback what you do, and Italy as the credo. I hope not too many French are listening right now, or British, or let's say one of the credos in the world of fashion. How do you see the future when it comes to being able to tell the story and being able to transparent, because there's nothing to hide and there's quality and responsibility there?
Yes, hi everyone, also from my side. So what we do with Via Made in Italy, we created a platform that is connecting international buyers or brands with Italian companies. So basically giving a chance, without traveling around the globe, to trade fairs, directly online from your phone or your desktop, connecting with Italian companies for ordering products or for connecting with them for any type of project. What we hope that we are doing is that creating efficiency in this fashion industry, on the one hand, because as I said before, so you don't need to travel to trade fairs. So hope that pollution will also decrease. Trade fairs are currently closed because of COVID, but also when they're going to reopen, I think many people have now experienced that many things can be done in a digital way nowadays. So you don't need to travel around the world to see a shoe. And so we launched 2 years ago, and what we've experienced is that there's a lot of demand coming in, especially for sustainable products currently. And I think Italy is in a good position because, as you said, we do great products here. I think in many categories we are the leader because we use premium materials, you know, because there's a certain price point also associated with Italian products. And it's not that you would go to Italy and order like millions of t-shirts, you know, because that's just not the type of product we have here. We would probably source this from other countries. Because the price point is also different. So if you order from Italy, you maybe also think twice how much you order, how much you put on stock, because you know the price point, as I said, is different. And I hope it's going to reduce also waste in the future because people and brands, you know, they need to calculate very well how much they order. What you said, or what the others also said before, is very true. I think it all starts also somehow with a way that the new generations are buying products. But not only, because I think one of the key problems is that many brands don't communicate well enough what they can actually offer, because the products are out there, you know, like the materials are out there, sustainable product. Also with plastic, there are alternatives. But I think we need to improve a lot the storytelling, especially in Europe, because the more awareness we create with the consumers, the higher demand will be, you know, the easier it's going to be introducing sustainable products in the world of fashion. And I think especially the big companies, the big players, the big luxury houses, they can really lead the way here. And I think it was maybe 2 years ago when they introduced, or they announced that they're not going to use any more animal fur for their coats. I think it was Gucci, maybe the first one. And then within a month, all the other fashion houses kind of jumped on this train and also said, and we're not going to use any more fur. So I think it's very, very similar with that. You know, it just needs the first one that really starts. And I think there is some movement because the fashion companies see that on the demand side, you know, some things are happening and the young generations want to have a sustainable product. So they will need to adapt in order to also sustain their growth, you know, and their revenues. And I hope, and I believe that Italy is on a good way to join this because we can provide premium products.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks, Marco. Fredrik, over to you. You are our data guy. You are able to really assess what's truly going on. There's a lot of greenwashing going on because, marketing is dominant in selling a product still. And it unfortunately often doesn't necessarily need to be backed up by a lot of truth, let's say, proof points. So Fredrik, maybe you can introduce yourself in terms of what you're doing and how you're helping companies to assess how sustainable they are and how sustainable they are becoming. That'd be really interesting to hear from you, how you see the role of data in this movement forward towards more sustainability and more efficiency.
Well, thanks a lot. And it's an incredibly impressive panel. So wonderful to be following such impressive speakers. Yes, fashion and sustainability and fashion, right? It's been high on the agenda for a number of years. And the pandemic hasn't changed that, I believe. But unfortunately, indeed, there have been lofty statements and promises. And in some areas, at least, it's not necessarily backed up by data. Right? So many ambitions. So for example, a large fashion house that committed to be carbon neutral, but in effect, what it did was simply to offset, right, its carbon footprint by buying some carbon credits. That's not really making the big effort in terms of making a proper change happen. This is an industry that's a master at storytelling, and it needs to be. Gives people positive emotions and aspirations. But again, when it comes to sustainability, it's not enough to tell the story, right? You really have to be able to back it up with substance. So to get a little bit technical about it, there is a difference between your inputs, what you spend money on, or the energy you use, the outputs, the activities, the outcomes, and the impact. And so if you have for example, a certificate that says that your raw material has a certain certified standard. That is still an output. It's not an outcome yet, because unless you can back it up with data to say, how has that actually changed, right? Is the water footprint any different? Is the biodiversity of where I'm sourcing from any different? It's still an output. And what we need in the world today, Stuart was talking about the millennials and younger asking for real impact and change, it has to be backed up by substance. And that is outcome and impact data. Now, when you look at the reporting of major fashion brands in terms of what they report on sustainability, unfortunately, mostly it's not backed up by numbers. And if it is backed up by numbers, you, for example, get our total water footprint is X millions of liters, and then it's changed by a few %. But what does that mean? Right? How has the intensity of your usage of water changed? So that's still not an outcome number. We don't know how it's substantively changed. So one of the biggest fashion houses, Kering, when they did their environmental reporting a few years ago, right? They pioneered this, really looking at the total value of their environmental footprint. They found that over 70% of the impact was at the bottom of their supply chain. Now, that's not including the dimension that Sian was talking about, which is, of course, what happens after the life cycle use, or Stuart, you were talking about it as well. So if you take the full life cycle into account, you have to measure it a bit differently. But up to the point of sale, more than 70% of the negative impact is happening at the bottom of the supply chain. And when you add the social and labor dimensions, you're still at 70 to 80% at the bottom. And so if we're talking about the full life cycle, indeed, we have to look at recycling, at upcycling, right, of the product itself. But we also have to look especially at the bottom of the supply chain. That means going beyond the factory to where the raw materials are produced. And right now what we have is a certification system, right? Forest certification, various raw material certification, but no numbers to back it up. And to the extent that the industry is serious about making that change, and Kering found it very difficult. It's finding the bottom to be the most difficult. You can reduce the footprint of your stores, of your transportation and your factories, and some of your suppliers, but the bottom is tough. And that's where the biggest effects are being created. So what we do at True Footprint is to help with it, to capture data at the corporate level, at the asset level, which is, for example, production, but then also by the producers bottom up, and actually helping the producing communities and producers themselves to generate verifiable data on an ongoing basis and helping them to achieve better results. The industry has an incredible opportunity to influence this if they're willing to just go that one step further from output reporting, commitments, right, principles and policies and these certificates to actual data. If they just go to that one step, they can have such an influence through the supply chain.
Very interesting. And what is necessary for, how would you say, what makes it interesting for a brand to dig this deep, right? Because, I mean, Sian has mentioned it earlier, is we are living in a waste system currently still. So it means it's accepted that things go to waste, that companies give away the responsibility for their products that they put into this world. So why would I be interested as a brand, as a corporation, to dig this deep? And what's necessary to happen that everybody's going to do this, right? Because I couldn't agree more, obviously, in terms of it's so essential to really assess what's the status quo, plus measuring then the developments that are then happening based on efforts within the company. But what is the, what's the prerequisite in terms of making everybody interested in assessing that?
Can I jump in there? Is that
yes?
I don't know if it is it. Let me dive in because I'm never knowingly under-opinionated, I'm afraid, and particularly on this area of responsibility, because everything that Fredrik has just said is so spot on right. It's that entire supply chain and its transparency. And right now, I'm sad to say, if we just look at the whole disaster that we have caused with the pollution of plastic and the impact that we know this is having on everything that lives on the planet, including ourselves, which is a whole other conversation about the impact on human health. And you look at the pacts and the pledges and the promises, this is the world I live in, working with industry, trying to persuade them and lead them down a path and show them that another material can be used. All of them making these pacts and pledges. If you added all the government commitments globally, every single pact and pledge that we've just been discussing, that Fred was just been laying out, if all of them were achieved, we would reduce ocean pollution by 7%. And none of them are going to be achieved. So it just shows how all of this, at the moment, this is lipstick on a pig. You know, we're just tokenism. A lot of it is green marketing, apart from 1,000,000. I love everything that I've heard about those products. I can't wait to get some. But we need laws, we need taxation. If shareholders do not realize that the companies they invest in are legislated, they're forced to do this by government policy, it's not going to happen. And particularly right now, where industry is in a state of disruption and panic and fear, and we're not quite knowing what next year is going to hold for any of us, to expect industry to self-govern out of the environmental crisis that we're in, it's too much to ask. Governments have to step up.
So doesn't that mean we have to step up because governments are just our representatives?
Absolutely. We have so much more power than we ever think. People should write to their elected MPs and say, what are you doing about this? You know, for me, living in the UK, how embarrassing is it that COP26 has been pushed back a year? And yet this conference is happening. Somehow this is, you know, we've all got our act together and we're all on Zoom and this is possible. But no, we've delayed it a year. We've only got 10 years to 2030 for this cataclysmic climate crisis date that 94% of the scientists globally have told us is coming. But no, we thought we can't quite get it together, so we'll push it back a year. It's shameful. We need to put a lot more pressure.
Fully agreed. So apart from, let's say, taxation, government regulation, etc., what is the one thing that you see, or anyone is free to answer this question, what needs to happen? If there's one thing each and every one of you would like to, you know, put into this world, or would make happen, what would it be? Apart from the government and taxation aspect, what needs to happen more than anything?
Change the narrative. Exactly what Fredrik was saying. We need to change the storytelling, and we need to stop this constant buy. You and I talked before about that incredible film Minimalism, and the one quote that has never left me: we will never have enough of something we don't actually need. And this whole circular fast fashion, just pumping it out, the seasonality of it, I haven't got the latest, and the Instagram culture that we have of perfection, and I will only be perfect if I'm wearing the perfect outfit and I've retouched my entire face. That's what we need to change. And imagine a world where the giants of the fashion industry came together to change that narrative and to reposition everything. And it wasn't about perhaps buying new. It would be very brave, it would be radical. But instead of buy my stuff, maybe an anti-sell campaign with all the giants coming together would be interesting, of showing, like, you know, this is shareware. Where's it going next? Passing things on from hand to hand, a completely new way of thinking about fashion. Mm-hmm. Because the model that we have now is never going to last. The sooner these giants, who I feel, particularly in fashion, so many industries are reinventing the narrative, and they look like businesses of the future. And the fashion industry, it's like they didn't get the memo. And they need to step over that line, and they need to change that storytelling.
I couldn't agree more. Like I told you the other day, when I scroll through my LinkedIn and I see the fashion posts, because I have worked in the industry for 15 years, I'm like, okay, am I living in a parallel universe? It's really interesting. There's a lot still in standstill on many fronts, but at the same time, massive opportunities. What would the rest say are the opportunities here? So for anyone who's watching, having a business, being a CEO of a corporation, being a person with a startup or a startup idea, where do we see the opportunities? That's a question to everyone. Fredrik, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, well, I first of all love what Sian said and the passion you bring to it. But so first, a negative point, right, was a fast fashion brand this summer in the UK, right, that was caught out because it was underpaying its employees. Well, Bank of America did a study a couple of years ago and found that 90% of the failures, bankruptcies in the S&P 500 had ESG failures in the previous 5 years. Right, environmental, social, and governance. So basic, the whole sustainability story. And so scandals and the kinds of miserable press that some of the fast fashion companies have had in terms of indeed all the waste, that's not helping anyone, right? That's not what you want to be associated with. But the positive opportunity that there is exactly where they have lost the memo, and I couldn't agree more. There is such an opportunity to tell such a positive story about where you're getting your stuff from, that you're contributing to a positive environment, that you're contributing to local communities producing wonderful things. So why aren't they able to really build on that? But it needs to be backed up. It needs to be credible, right? It can't be just smoke and mirrors. You really have to be able to back that stuff up. But if you can, you could be telling the most wonderful story. That's what people want to buy into and vote with their wallets.
So in terms of, there's two poles, I would say, when it comes to who is going to have to be in the lead. Many say the industry, others say the consumer, right? So it's up to us. We need to demand it for it to happen. Whoever is up for it, for answering the question, please just jump in. I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on what's more important. Where does the revolution need to come from to really push beyond, let's say, changing it a bit to full-on change of the whole industry towards circularity?
I think demand is there already. I think a lot of the demand is there, and the more the younger generation will, step up and get older and start buying, the more the companies will need to change and adapt and supply the products that they're actually asking. So I think demand side is there. It's really about companies providing the product and as everyone said before, telling the story better, backed up by data and certificates and so on. But I think demand side is there, and also materials are there. Like it's not that we need to invent everything from scratch. It's actually there. It's just the companies need to place them and use them. And I think really it's the big ones who need to lead the way here as well. It's the big fashion houses. They have to have this responsibility, but also the shareholders need to understand that. I think we need to switch a bit away from shareholder maximization to stakeholder maximization. Okay, so we still need starting like in education and universities. We need to switch a bit what we are teaching future entrepreneurs. It's not only the shareholder value that matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll weigh in a little bit here too. I think it's kind of a two-sided marketplace in a way, and that I think customers and consumers need to demand it, and I think they already have, as Marco kind of outlined. I think the fact that I love so much is that secondhand and resale is growing 21 times faster than fast fashion is, and that's really propagated and fueled by that younger generation. I think there's something like beautiful and brilliant about that. I think the hard part here, and I'm incredibly optimistic. I think that these major fast fashion retailers and larger incumbent brands know that they need to change. And what I've seen as being really valuable and helpful is at the very least flagging that this is a thing. And so I'm in a uphill battle about teaching people what the circular economy is, because if I went out on the street of New York and asked the average person, like, no one would know. So it's really helpful when larger incumbent brands mention it, or have goals, or have it's mostly just like creative white papers and design briefs around it, but it is helpful and it is valuable. I think what's really interesting here, and what's really difficult though for these larger incumbents, is that these supply chains, and I think we all know it, but it's, I guess, maybe worth repeating, are so hard to move along. And in order to hit scale, and in order to hit cost, like fiber commitments are made 10 to 15 years out. And so that's why when you see a lot of these changes that are being rolled out by the larger incumbents, it takes until 2030 or until 2040, and it's really difficult to do. And I think that while there'll be the ones to signal it, I think it's really going to be like challenger and upstart brands that are going to be pioneering it and moving the needle. At least that's the bet I'm making. And I think what's really interesting there, and there's some really great leaders that have already gone out and made these big commitments. Tommy Hilfiger, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, had a big feature in Vogue Business about how he's going to be moving his entire business to circular by 2030. But if you really like unpack that, you realize that it's through big partnerships, or through partnerships with other people. And I think the other thing that's maybe under talked about is that retail is a really tight margin business, and that it's difficult for these brands to make this R&D investment. And I think it's going to require strategic partners that are invested in building out the infrastructure for reverse logistics and the circular economy, at least in my space. you know, to come in there from day one and build it, and then being able to run larger brands across that infrastructure. So I'm really optimistic that it's going to happen. I'm really optimistic that people are heading in that way. And again, to Marco's point too, like the material innovation is there. You know, and a lot of it's at scale, at cost. It's a matter of just going in and doing the R&D and developing into it, which was a huge unlock for us too. I think when we started this business 3 years ago, it was really fueled by this material R&D that was happening. And we were seeing some like incredible stuff on the biofabrication side of things, but then also, you know, with some really exciting things with synthetics that were happening. And so, you know, I think it's there, and I think the customer's demanding it. And I think what's going to be really interesting, and what we're already seeing early as a business, is that the financials around it really pay off and are really big. And that's coming in the form of repeat purchase rates and customer loyalty and lifetime value increasing, and keeping people engaged with that ecosystem, and making it and showing that, like, hey, if you have this circular component to your company, it's actually a value add to top line, which I think is really gonna move the needle. And I also think for us, what we've seen is that our core audience loves sharing about it. Like, granted, when we go out and market, everybody's wants like comfortable and affordable and all of those things that everybody looks for when they shop sneakers. But the real hook and the real conversion is like, these actually turn into new shoes and we'll pay you for it. So yeah, I'm really optimistic, and I think it's being led by the consumer, and I think it's going to be upstart brands that really push it forward to nudge these larger incumbents to make change.
Cool. Sounds there's a lot of hope. That's very good.
Yeah, I just would like to add, I don't think we can wait for politics to help on this road, because it's they are trying for years, for decades, but like there's just no movement, because they only think about their next election day, and whatever is like in the news right now, they're gonna talk about this, but it's never like long-term perspective. So it's really up to us entrepreneurs and corporations to lead the way. I lost my hope, I'm sorry, for politicians.
I completely concur with you, actually. Right? And I think one of the problems is that all governments are enthralled to the fossil fuel industry. And the fossil fuel industry, you know, I mean, fashion might be number 2 polluter, but the fossil fuel industry is obviously number 1. And fashion is polluting largely because it's using its product. And the amount of money, you know, this year alone, $200 million spent on lobbying the US government in order to get pollution restrictions lifted through the pandemic in the name of industry recovery. And governments are ridiculously enthralled to them. There's a scary number, which is some very, very clever people, probably Fredrik was one of them, have done the maths to calculate how much do we need to clean up the climate crisis. How much do we need? And it's $4 trillion. And interestingly, the subsidies that every global government give to the fossil fuel industry, directly and indirectly, are $6 trillion. The money is there. As you said, the materials are there, the money is there. We just need the pressure to do it, wherever that comes from.
And that's absolutely on point. Fredrik, in terms of pain points, you work with the corporations, you work with the companies that are approaching you. Can you share with us, how they see things, what their pain points are, what do they need to move forward into this new era? Because let's say overall, at the end of the day, I personally find that the finger always leads back to ourselves in terms of we live in a certain system and we follow along. We live under certain pressures of making money, of making the shareholders happy. So it's a big ship to turn around. And in terms of that, let's say the captains of the big ships, what do they come to you with? So what are their main points that you see? If you could share a little bit about that without being, let's say, without naming anyone.
Well, it is actually that combination of anxiety, and underlying risk. So is the price of carbon, for example, going to, start going up? Well, we know it's going to go up, but by how much? But then are there hidden underlying risks that we don't know about? Because the quality of ESG data at the moment, at the very best, 1 data point a year. So what we help them with at True Footprint is to produce continuous data, so that they really have their finger on the pulse. But the truth is, Wolfgang, it's not everyone who wants this, right? So, there are those who simply want the status quo to continue and don't want it to move too fast, please. And others who, however, and it is that younger generation of CIOs, if they're near the end of their career, maybe they don't want to rock the boat too much. But if they are 40 some years old and they have a good 20 years ahead of them, they definitely know that they have legacy issues. But then look at it the other way around. Is where are the materials going to come from, the natural fibers, natural materials that fashion depends upon? Do you have a reliable supply, for example, of cashmere, of other things, right? Where is it going to come from? So in various sectors, there is tremendous anxiety around where those materials are going to come from for the next 20, 30 years, 40 years. Half of the coffee growing areas in the world that are growing Arabica today may not be able to sustain Arabica in the next 15 years. So it's going to become a super luxury good. But that's going to happen in various other areas as well, right? So there is an enormous anxiety happening in various companies as to where they're going to have that reliable supply. They can't count on the world being the same anymore. And through this combination of pressures, obviously, the consumer pressure is tremendous, but they haven't been able to push them yet to give hard numbers. The demand for hard numbers is coming from pension funds, from asset managers, and now increasingly from some corporates. We haven't done a good enough job on this. We have to be better, but it's actually to educate consumers that they can be requesting this, demanding this as well, right? Go beyond the certificates to really know what is the footprint of this. And if we can get the consumer on board, I think this could be a game changer for it.
Nice, great. And it's interesting, what I found very, very strong as in numbers is that 2/3 of consumers are self-proclaimed belief-driven buyers. So they choose and switch, avoid, or boycott a brand based on its stand on societal issues. I mean, that tells us if we have a movement in the minds of people towards sustainability, towards transparency, towards working together more, etc., then business is going to have to follow very, very quickly in order to survive, right? So I would say that really caters into what you're saying, is that there's a lot of pressure behind it, and potentially it is really up to us as one spending the money and choosing the products to really drive that change. Maybe Sian, would you mind sharing with us what you shared with me, what consumer really means and where it comes from? I found that really interesting.
Yeah, I find it so interesting too, because we all call ourselves consumers, and we talk about consumer rights, and we say, what about me, the consumer? And yet, when I actually dug a little deeper into what the etymology of that word consumer is, because it's still a relatively new word, it comes from the 15th century, and it means to squander and to waste. And that says everything, doesn't it? That actually all we're doing with this constant consumption and this hyper-consumptive world that we live in right now, inevitably what we're doing is squandering and waste. And so it really tells me, I'm trying to wean myself off using that word now, and I'm trying to talk about citizens and the public and the shopper, rather than using that word consumer, because once you know, you're never going to unknow.
True. I found that really interesting too. And yeah, being a citizen, I mean, at the end of the day, from a more philosophical point of view, we are pretty good as humans to pass things on, right? So we pass things on to our children, we pass things on to others, we want legacy, etc. So we haven't really done a good job at passing on good things to our planet. And that's where a lot of opportunity lies. So yeah, I would like to jump in with one question from the audience. So just 1 second, I'm just going to read it out loud, and whoever would like to answer to it, please do so. What would you advise to the customers and supporters of sustainable lifestyle? Is it better to order recycled or biodegradable on, let's say, Amazon, or buy something plastic at the local store and reduce the carbon footprint? It's from Anastasia. She would like to have an answer for that. Who would like to jump in? So
I could just say something quickly on the plastic. I mean, the myth of recycling, we have to get over it. There are no recycling fairies. I hate to burst the recycling bubble, but 91% of all the plastic ever made and it has never been recycled. In the US, the less than 5% of plastic is recycled in the US. Of the 7 little numbers that you see on the back of your packaging, and only numbers 1 and 2 are even recyclable. None of the others have any value. It is an absolute myth created by the big consumer brands, some of the world's biggest polluters, the Coca-Colas of this world, to pretend that we can just recycle our way out of it. It's never going to happen. We're never going to clean up the oceans. Bless her, nature has to do that. You know, it is everywhere. It is 6 miles deep in the ocean. There is not any part of our planet that we have not contaminated with this indestructible toxic material. The only answer is to use less of it. So recycling, unless, as Stuart was saying, unless you are keeping something and you own it, and you're literally just loaning it to the wearer, and then you're responsible, it has a value to you, so I want to get it back. The second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, forever time. That's what we're talking about with extended producer responsibility and true circularity. And recycling plastic, some materials, yes, aluminium, incredible. 91% of all aluminium is still in circulation today, extraordinary. A value system is there. Glass, you know, paper, cartonboard, all of these things, fully recyclable, and there is a value system there and an infrastructure. Plastic, it is an absolute myth. Do not fall for it.
Okay.
NPR just had a really great article that they did in conjunction with PBS called Plastic Wars. If you haven't read it, you should. And it talks about the switch that was made in the late 80s, early 90s to start putting recycling icons on plastic and then numbering them. And then the difficulty of separating plastic in a single feed. It's like near impossible, and especially not at cost. But Sean said something really interesting. Yeah, you need to own feeds. And owning singular material feeds is the way to do it. But the question asked was a good one. I think the tricky thing with Amazon specifically is that everything's 2-day ship. And in order to achieve that, that means packing everything up really quickly and throwing it on a flight. And Amazon can do that at scale. So there's huge carbon footprint. I think what we're going to start seeing as we go forward, though, from a fulfillment side of things to like reduce carbon footprint is going to be localized and like small footprint, like same day delivery. And there's some really exciting companies out there that are tackling this in like major metropolitan areas where you get the same day or like 2-day delivery option, but it's being biked over from like a local like micro warehouse and then aggregated, which is really interesting. But no, the hard thing too there is that oftentimes the local supermarkets or the local cosmetic counters or drugstores don't really have good viable alternatives. And so it's a really tough question. It's hard to gauge. And I think what I've tried to do is that everyone should realize that we're all on this sustainability journey together and that we're at different phases here. And by no means is anybody perfect. So like, please come and join in whatever phase you're in, and you can phase things out slowly and little by little. And like what we do with a lot of our bath products is there's a couple of really great companies here in the US that send you glass, and then you can put in tablets to do soaps and to do like detergents, etc. So if anything you can do, you know, if it's a one-time ship and you're able to then really kind of cut down on plastic, that'd be great. Hopefully that answers the question.
The refill revolution is here to stay.
It's amazing. I love it. It's amazing.
We can learn from our pretty near ancestors. They already did that. We just kind of forgot about it in the last couple of decades.
The milkman model, where yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, when I think about my grandma or my grandpa, they were all about, you know, fixing their clothes, about you know, putting their own jam in their own glasses and drinking out of mustard cups that they saved from. But we have one more question that I would like to jump into. The question is, legacy of things is personal or a legacy of planet is shared? How do we change citizen mindset on this and drive emphasis from personal to shared? Whoever wants to answer this, please do.
Love that question. I feel it's happening already, don't you? I feel I don't have the same yearning to own so many possessions anymore, and therefore I will be sharing because I'll only have it when I want it. So really everything that we've been talking about, and it's the businesses that move to that model. Like I don't need to own a bike in London. I can just borrow one when I need one. I don't really need to own a car. I can just sit in one when I need one. And these models, I think, will just grow and grow. And the one that really is moving slowest in this, but I feel it's coming at pace now, is the fashion industry. So we're definitely moving to a more sharing community.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the big thing is it's less like individual versus collective, and it's more of like mitigating what an individual has to give up like from an experience point of view in order to join the share economy. Like I feel like everybody remembers when Uber first launched, it was people like, no way you're going to get into a stranger's car, like no way. And then it's totally a normal way to get around. I mean, same with scooters and bikes, and fashion's beginning to catch up a little bit at the higher price point with sort of the rental economy that you're starting to see roll. And even then it was an uphill battle. It's like, yeah, no way anybody's going to want to share denim or share dresses. And you're starting to see that behavior change. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, consumer behavior is radically going to be different. And their thoughts on ownership is going to be different. And this idea, I really see co-ownership starting to happen between brands and consumers, brands really being invested stakeholders and taking product back, much in the same way that sort of these rental services are doing now. And I think that the big thing there's some really smart people that are tackling this. And I think that the big unlock here is making sure that individuals don't have to sacrifice a lot in order to get there. And I think, early generations of sustainability have really caused the end consumer to have to go through a ton of hassle and sacrifice a lot of either the product or the experience. And I think what we're seeing now is that delta is really starting to close, and that's really where these ideas start to get adopted.
Very cool, thank you. So we're already coming close to the end. So I would like to ask one question to all of you. If you could just answer in just 1 to 3 sentences in regards to the fashion industry and this ultimate necessity to move towards circularity. What is the one thing that you would like to see? Where's the one opportunity that you would like for the majority of businesses and consumers like to tap into?
I'll start. I'd love to see much easier access to information. And I think that there is an absolute knowledge gap that I witness every day between designers of everything, of products, of clothing, of packaging, of everything, and the makers, the creators of these materials. And I find it extraordinary that I think so there's an increase of something like 8 times the textile patent applications, 8 times increase since 2013. That's how fast this is happening. But this app exists. And if you're a big company, you might have access to all of this information, but the smaller ones don't. And that we need to fill. And it's actually something we're working on at A Plastic Planet, creating a platform where you can connect designers and makers.
Great.
I would like to see, as I said in my intro, like one of the big fashion houses, leading the way in this, because it could be very, very easy, as we saw with the animal fur, it just needs the first one to start, and it's always difficult to be the first one, but we have the chance to do it, especially the European brands. They are strong, they are worldwide, they sell their products everywhere. So if one of them really starts and leads the way, I think then actually change can come very, very fast, because the other one need to kind of step up and join this movement. Otherwise they will be left out. So I would wish for that one of the really big ones change. And that could lead actually then, to educating also the consumers, or we don't call it consumers anymore, shoppers, right?
Mm-hmm. Citizens, even better. Citizens of the world. Fredrik.
Well, clearly there are opportunities to learn more from Sian. Every time she opens her mouth, I'm learning things from her. So that's already one big gain. But yes, this simple quest for transparency. And let's just reframe this. Let's reframe it simply in terms of the fashion industry having a positive impact. I know it's a big stretch, but how about simply moving that way, right? So one thing is stopping to use certain things that simply shouldn't be part of the equation. Fur, plastics, very straightforward. But then moving beyond that to actually have a net positive impact. That should be the simple goal.
Great.
Just to build on something Fredrik just said, I loved what you said earlier, Fredrik, about the whole thing of we have a right. as the shoppers, as the buyers of fashion, we have a right to ask for this information. And wouldn't it be incredible for the fashion houses to put a press campaign, a social media campaign out there saying, ask the people who make your clothes, ask these questions of them because you have a right to know. Because I don't think anybody realizes what questions they should even be asking. Exactly. I think that was a brilliant idea.
Well, let's work on that one.
I love this, and in addition to all of that, I think the thing that I really want to see is sustainability start to be price point attainable. And I think a big focus of ours is innovating at or below $100. You know, I think there's been some really great movements. I think what's really difficult is and because consumers are willing to spend, or shoppers are willing to spend more. But I think it's really difficult when you know, it's 2 or 3 times more expensive. So I'm really interested in this idea of democratizing, you know, and redefining sustainability for this next generation and making it attainable for people.
Very cool. I could not agree more. Personally, I also very strongly believe that through technology, we can create efficiency gains that then make sustainability affordable in fashion. So it's a different story. I mean, it goes from direct to consumer models to all the way to, I mean, what you can create in terms of passing clothing on, right? To really then also enable people to buy great stuff and very systematically then in the second hand, for example, and really make that attractive and create a circular story here where clothing is literally being passed on. It doesn't need to go to a landfill or try to be recycled anytime soon after the first person wore it a couple of times, right? Great. Well, we're at the very end right now. Thank you so much, everyone, for your input. It's been a blast. I was honored enough to also be able to speak to you beyond the panel. So thanks a million times from everyone at Techtalia, at Human Capital Network, and from myself. This has been a really, really great panel. I hope everybody who watched the panel got something out of this as well. And let's keep the communication channels open. As one takeaway, I would like to share with you as a closing remark. I hope, Sian, you're going to approve of her this time. She's also an idol, and I think you might like her better than David Attenborough. She said, "You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you." And basically, it's up to us to decide what kind of impact that is. And maybe with that, we can work in the next weeks and months and years to come in the future that we don't know yet, in terms of creating the second largest industry and transitioning it into something more meaningful and less impactful in a negative way. Thanks so much, everybody, and hope to speak to all of you very soon.
Thanks,
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Wolfgang, for hosting.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing me on.